Ethics of the Real. Kant. Lacan. Introduction. The concept of ethics, as it is developed throughout the history of philosophy, suffers a double blow of disillusionment at the hands of psychoanalysis. The first strike is associated with the name of Sigmund Freud, the second with that of Jacques Lacan. It is no accident that, in both cases, the same philosopher is the focus of discussion, Immanuel Kant. The Freudian blow to philosophical ethics can be summarized as follows. What philosophy calls the moral law, and, more precisely, what Kant calls the categorical imperative, is in fact nothing other than the superego. This judgment provokes an effect of disenchantment that calls into question any attempt to base ethics on foundations other than the pathological. At the same time, it places ethics at the core of what Freud called das Unbehagen in der Kultur, the discontent or malaise at the heart of civilization. Insofar as it has its origins in the constitution of the superego, ethics becomes nothing more than a convenient tool for any ideology which may try to pass off its own commandments as the truly authentic, spontaneous, and honorable inclinations of the subject. This thesis, according to which the moral law is nothing but the superego, calls, of course, for careful examination, which I shall undertake in chapter 7 below. The second blow to the solidity of philosophical ethics affected by psychoanalysis is indicated by the title of Lacan's famous essay from Écrit, Kant with Sade. This second blow is all the more devastating if we bear in mind the fact that for Lacan, as far as the philosophical discourse on ethics goes, Kant was the truest of all philosophers. The Lacanian blow to ethics can thus be summarized. The best thing philosophy has to offer in the name of ethics is a kind of practical philosophy in the bedroom, to paraphrase the title of Sade's famous work. However, Lacan's critique of Kantian ethics as the pinnacle of the project of philosophical ethics differs considerably from Freud's critique. Lacan gives Kant credit for discovering the real core of ethics, a core that maintains its relevance and cannot be reduced to the logic of the superego. But he criticizes Kant for turning this core into an object of the will, a move that finds its truth in the perverse discourse of Sade. It is thus that Kant with Sade constitutes the prime example of the eye-opening effect that analysis makes possible in relation to the many efforts, even the most noble ones, of traditional ethics. This statement, however, calls for two comments. First, we should remember that the intention, and the result as well, of Kant with Sade is not only to open our eyes to the real effects, even the most noble ones, of Kant's practical philosophy, but also to ennoble the discourse of Sade. The thesis of Kant with Sade is not simply that Kantian ethics has a merely perverse value. It is also the claim that Sade's discourse has an ethical value, that it can be properly understood only as an ethical project. Second, it must be pointed out that this remark of Lacan's comes immediately after the claim, the moral law, looked at more closely, is simply desire in its pure state. This statement is far from innocent, since, as is well known, this concept of pure desire plays an important, even a central, role in Lacan's seminar on the ethics of psychoanalysis. We should also stress that unlike Freud, and in spite of his criticism of traditional ethics, Lacan does not conclude here that an ethics worthy of the name is thus impossible. On the contrary, he turns ethics, insofar as it concerns the desire of the analyst and the nature of the analytic act, into one of the pivots of psychoanalysis, even if this requires a new conceptualization of the ethical. Kant will play an important part in this new conceptualization. Kant is admired by Lacan, above all for his break at two crucial points with traditional ethics. The first is his break with the morality that spelled out obligations in terms of the possibility of fulfilling them. According to Lacan, the crucial point here is that morality as such, as Kant well knew, is a demand for the impossible, the impossibility in which we recognize the topology of our desire. By insisting on the fact that the moral imperative is not concerned with what might or might not be done, Kant discovered the essential dimensions of ethics, the dimensions of desire, which circles around the real qua impossible. This dimension was excluded from the purview of traditional ethics, and could therefore appear to it only as an excess. So Kant's crucial first step involves taking the very thing excluded from the traditional field of ethics and turning it into the only legitimate territory for ethics. If critics often criticize Kant for demanding the impossible, Lacan attributes an incontestable theoretical value to this Kantian demand. Kant's second break with the tradition, related to the first, was his rejection of the view that ethics is concerned with the distribution of the good, the service of goods, in Lacan's terms. Kant rejected an ethics based on my wanting what is good for others, provided of course that their good reflects my own. It is true that Lacan's position concerning the status of the ethics of desire continued to develop. Hence, his position in Seminar 11, the four fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis, differs on several points from the one he adopted in Seminar 7, the ethics of psychoanalysis. That the moral law, looked at more closely, is simply desire in its pure state, is a judgment which, had it been pronounced in Seminar 7, would have had the value of a compliment. Clearly, this is no longer the case when it is pronounced in Seminar 11. Yet, even though the later Lacan claims that the analyst's desire is not a pure desire, this does not mean that the analyst's desire is pathological, in the Kantian sense of the word, nor that the question of desire has lost its pertinence. To put the matter simply, the question of desire does not so much lose its central place as cease to be considered the end point of analysis. In the later view, analysis ends in another dimension, that of the drive. Hence, as the concluding remarks of Seminar 11 have it, before this dimension opens up to the subject, he must first reach and then traverse the limit within which, as desire, he is bound. As a result of this, we can establish a rough schema to orientate us in the difficult terrain of Lacan's discussion of ethics. Traditional ethics, from Aristotle to Bentham, remained of this side of desire. The morality of power, the service of goods, is as follows. As far as desires are concerned, come back later. Make them wait. Kant was the one who introduced the dimension of desire into ethics and brought it to its pure state. This step, crucial as it was, nevertheless needs another supplementary step, which Kant, at least according to Lacan, did not take. The step that leads beyond desire and its logic into the realm of the drive. Hence, after the mapping of the subject in relation to the objects of desire, the experience of the fundamental fantasy becomes the drive. As far as Lacan's interrogation of ethics is concerned, Kant is his most important philosophical reference point. Lacan's other reference in this matter, and quite a different one than that, is tragedy. These two reference points are the basic themes of this book, which, by means of a reading of Kant, Lacan and several works of literature, seeks to outline the contours of what I would like to call an ethics of the real. An ethics of the real is not an ethics orientated towards the real, but an attempt to rethink ethics by recognizing and acknowledging the dimension of the real, in the Lacanian sense of the term, as it is already operative in ethics. The term ethics is often taken to refer to a set of norms which restrict or bridle desire, which aim to keep our conduct, or say the conduct of science, free from all excess. Yet this understanding of ethics fails to acknowledge that ethics is by nature excessive, that excess is a component of ethics which cannot simply be eliminated without ethics itself losing all meaning. In relation to the smooth course of events, life as governed by the reality principle, ethics always appears as something excessive, as a disturbing interruption. But the question remains of the cause I am following in this theoretical attempt at an ethics of the real. In Lacanian terms, the decline of the discourse of the master, Lacan's understanding of the advent of modernity, forces the discourse of an ethics into an impasse. The ethical maxim behind the discourse of the master is perhaps best formulated in the famous verse from Juvenal: Summum crede nefas animam prefere pudori et proper vitam vivendi perdere causas. Count it in the greatest of all sins to prefer life to honor and to lose, for the sake of all living, all that makes life worth living. Another version of this credo might be found in Paul Claudel: sadder than to lose one's life is it to lose one's reason for living. In Kant with Sade, Lacan proposes his own translation of this ethical motto. Desire, what is called desire, suffices to make life have no sense in playing a coward. Modernity, it seems, offered no alternative to the discourse of the master, besides the feeble maxim, the worst thing one can lose is one's own life. This maxim lacks both conceptual force and the power to mobilize. This lack, in turn, is part of what makes political discourses that proclaim a return to traditional values so seductive. It also accounts for much of the fascinated horror evoked by extremists and fanatics who want nothing more than to die for their cause. This book is an attempt to provide a conceptual framework for an ethics which refuses to be an ethics based on the discourse of the master, but which equally refuses the unsatisfactory option of a postmodern ethics based on the reduction of the ultimate horizon of the ethical to one's own life.